Hello, this is National Chess Master Rats at ICC, here to analyze a game played in Team 4545 League between Epcot and F5, and this was played in Team Event 57. It was elected as Game of the Week for Round 6, and let's have a look. It's a pretty interesting game. The clock definitely is a factor here. We'll explain as we move along. And naturally, of course, I didn't comment. Mr. F5 is opened with F5. Okay. All right. This is taking the shape of what they call the Leningrad Dutch. I had a game with this in correspondence chess in ICCF back in the 90s. I had opened with C4 as the first move, and it transposed into it. I was playing a British grandmaster, and very tricky game. I was able to sacrifice the exchange on him for a long-lasting initiative that finally cracked through. And that was in World Championship semifinal event. Anyway, I don't remember that game right off the top of my head. But this game is similar in some respects to the position I had. I don't think I played A3. I remember his knight doing a knight A6 to C7 maneuver. And let's just talk about this position. I've kind of gone through it just a little bit. What's happening? Both sides are getting their pieces developed, but they're not complete. There have been no pieces or pawns exchanged, and at the same time, there are no pawns locked up, so everything's wide open. There's all kinds of possibilities here. Let's just kind of talk about the possibilities here. Let's look at this diagonal, for instance. White's running into a problem. The two problems, actually. Number one, this pawn is blocking the bishop's diagonal. Number two, this bishop is opposing it should it ever open up. Now, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but conversely, what's black's bishop doing? The white bishop seems to have a long diagonal, but it can only go as it can't go to D5 and it can't go to E4, and the black counterpart doesn't have a whole lot of activity. Let's consider knight outposts. Let's get rid of these circles and arrows. Okay, E5 is covered, so white can't really access that. There's no point in really going to G5. You're not bothering any squares. Knight H4 could only be useful if G6 was weak. That is, if black had played in H6. And it's not all that clear what influence this knight's having, except perhaps on this E4 square. White could perhaps play for an E4 break in an effort to take away. If black exchanges, white will wrest control of E4 away from him and have a E4 as a jumping ground, perhaps for a couple of pieces, the knight or the bishop. To activate this bishop might mean that it just gets traded. At some point, white might want to be pushing for D5, but clearly that square's owned by black right now. There's not much white can do with it. The rooks don't have any open files to get on because there's been no pawns exchanged. So essentially the position's dynamically even, and it's going to continue to stay this way throughout the middle game as both sides are just trying to maintain some kind of a balance. It's basically, if you're in a position like this, all you need to do is develop your pieces. Okay, so a good candidate move for black in this position would be just to develop this bishop, maybe to E6, maybe to D7. The possibility of going to E6 might let white tickle it with knight G5, and if it draws back to F7, white could pick up the bishop pair. So maybe bishop D7 is prudent. At the same time, black could be aiming for an E5 break, trying to get some space on the king side and hopefully get some kind of a king side attack going. That's what black would like to do in the Dutch, is attack on the king side. So let's see how this progresses. So black makes a little versatile move, tucks his king away in the corner. It's a kind of move that black can afford to make, simply because white isn't really threatening to do anything. The black position has no weaknesses. it avoids a potential check on that diagonal later, and it, to some degree, it might plan to play bishop e6 so that the bishop has a haven on g8. I was just talking about maybe putting that bishop on e6. Well, now it makes a little more sense. You're not just limited to the d7 square. And since the black position doesn't have a weakness, and white can't really open it up to where he can utilize any open lines, black's able to take time to do this. Okay, so white plays rook e1. This kind of signals that he wants to play e4, but why not play it right now? Let's just have a look for the fun of it. Okay, you have to be very careful here. You could be stepping into a pin, and that's one reason why that king may have gone to g8. White doesn't have knight takes f6 to jettison the knight with check, so that the queen can get out of danger. White's kind of in trouble here. Well, maybe not. He can play knight h4. It might be the only move. The point being, black was threatening d5, and now if d5 comes, you just gobble the bishop up and break the pin. But anyway, e4 just right away seems to make some sense, because for the moment white's not really sure yet where he wants both of his rooks, and nothing wrong with putting it on the e file, but it does take it away from the f file, and we don't want our pieces to be tied down to defending, but perhaps black can put some pressure on f2 at some point, and the rook might have been better waiting to see where it could go. An alternative move would be to swing the other rook over to e1. Now that has some potential drawbacks. If white wants to later open up some files on the queen side, his rook's no longer there. So I'm thinking white can play e4 right away, but there's nothing wrong with rook e1. Really, there isn't. And looks like black is trying to prepare an e5 break here, and white gets his e4 in, and black says, "Hey, I'm not gonna give you control of e4. I'm gonna push by and try and open up the f file." So this, in a way, kind of exposes the drawback with rook fe1. If black takes on here, he's got more pressure down the f file. Now white's got all the bases covered, and black has still not completed his development. Black's not really going to be able to take advantage of this, but those pieces can spring to life at any moment. If you notice the white formation, white's pretty much all behind pawns. The only piece that's not behind a pawn is this knight on f3. So white's not really posed aggressively to do anything to black. If anything, black's the one with a little bit of an initiative right now. That's one thing about the Dutch. If you play it right, you get, and white doesn't play it right, black can get some chances. That doesn't mean that white isn't okay. It doesn't mean that at all. But who would you rather be, the aggressor or not? Okay, so but now white finds a new plan. He does want to occupy e4, and this opens up the square. It also further shuts down this diagonal, and potentially this pawn becomes a little bit of a nuisance in white's way, and we'll see what I mean by that in a little bit. But black liquidates. Now, for what it's worth, the pawn on e5 is taking f6 away from a knight, but white has given up control of one square that he had under control before, and that's c5. And black can use this square to redeploy his knight, and that's exactly what it does. It's just screaming to be played, because black's got to finish his queenside development. And okay, I'm not entirely certain knight d4 is the right move here. The reason I say is, okay, black has control over e6, two knights and a bishop. If black wants to maintain that square with a piece, he's going to be able to do it. All knight d4 does is say, we're going to trade some pieces. This is a decent time to start the pawns going. Okay, he's going to play knight e6. Now you're ready at the right time to play b5. Or another move, just swing this rook over to d1. But anyway, let's have a look at this, and we can go on forever about all the possibilities here. Black puts e6 further under his control and has masked threats on f7 or f2. So suddenly the thing I was saying about white giving up control of that square by moving his rook over, black's actually generating something, and white needs to react to that. If black's threatening to play pawn takes, and if pawn takes back here, let's just play a stupid move for white to illustrate. A way I can make it black's move. Now, has black really gained anything out of this? Yes and no. There's a kind of a pin on this knight, although it's protected. But who wants to let the enemy queen down your throat like that early? And if in the moment you stop and kick it out, it's just going to find more menacing squares. Let's see, and meanwhile it's black's move, so let's pick a developing move for black. Let's just put that there for the fun of it. Now white can chase the queen, okay, but still the queen's infested in the position. There's now a threat on e5. Queen takes, so you guard that but tickle the queen one more time. And let's see, where shall black put the queen? How about h6? The game still looks about even, but black's the one been making the threats, not white. And if when you're white, you open with the first move, and if your opponent's doing the attacking, then perhaps you've done something wrong. But let's see how white deals with the threat on f2, and he just ignores it with a tempo. So black would have to sacrifice a, well, black can take here. Let's see, takes, then there's this take. That seems to do the trick. So let's revert. Okay, so question, why doesn't black take this? Okay, maybe he feels there's just not enough with queen f2 check, and that this will open up the file and force black into kind of a defensive posture, and he doesn't want to give up the fact that he's got this battery set up on the f file. So I'm just kind of illustrating things, trying to find out if one side has a threat. But here white takes back control of c5 and drives the knight away. And then this is good. If let black take, improve the when you make exchanges, improve the position of your pieces, not those of your opponents. Case in point, let's just look here. Look at this position. Stick it in your memory banks. Now black can take with the knight, or let's just take with the bishop for the fun of it, because that develops a piece. Now it's white's move in this position. If black takes, then white has gained something here. This knight has improved his position from d2 to d4. So white has made exchanges that help him. And in the other position, as I said, it was black had that bishop out to e6. And let's just look at it again, and we can see the difference. If knight takes, bishop takes, and it's white's move, he can play knight d4 and try to catch up. But then black swings a rook over, and if you kick it, hey, if the bishop has to, it can just fall back to c8. It's out of the rook's way. So white's doing it correctly. This is something you want to remember when you have opportunities to exchange pieces. Improve the position of your pieces while you're doing it. So that's exactly what happens, and white's happy with that. But then one drawback with this strategy is that pieces are going to be coming off the board. And notice, by the way, that white's maneuver has secured f2. And one thing I try to advocate if you're going to play for a win with either side is don't trade pieces. The logic being you want to feel you can do more with yours than your opponent can do with his. So you can maneuver yours better. Now that's up to you. You're going to have to find the good moves. But White just allows exchanges, and again he doesn't want to take on e6. He's going to let Black take on d4 and improve the position of his pieces. So White's doing it correct, but pieces are coming off the board, and so White has a comfortable lead in development now. Both bishops are out, the rooks are centralized, and Black still has to develop a bishop and a rook back at home. White. This is a position that basically says White's holds the advantage of the first move. That plus over equals a very light plus over equals. It's not enough to win, but there is a weakness in the Black camp I haven't mentioned yet, and here it is. It's the pawn on e7. But I also want to note one thing too at this point. Look at the clock. Both sides have used a good portion of their time, and we're barely at move 21. And if you're playing in a long time control over the board, where usually you, like if you're in a big weekend event, usually have 2 hours for your first 40 moves. See, White has invested 33 minutes on his clock, plus the increment of 45 seconds times 20, basically, which would be 900 seconds, which is, what, 15 minutes? So White's invested, what did I say, 33 and 15. He's invested 48 minutes in this game, and he's down to just 12 minutes. Normally, in a real tournament, if a White invested 48 minutes, he's still going to have better than an hour on his clock to make 20 moves. And once he reaches move 40, usually, depending on the tournament, he'll have maybe a sudden death in 1 hour, which should be sufficient to play the ending out if you're still in a game. So it's one drawback with this 45-45 time control. You can tend to get in time pressure if you're trying to replicate a normal time control that you'd play in a real over-the-board event. But anyway, Black isn't in much better shape. He just has an extra 7 minutes, but Black does enjoy some kind of time advantage, and so White maybe could have come up with some of these moves a little quicker. Maybe he was trying to get more out of the position than was there, but there really wasn't all that much there. White never really had any kind of an active plan. He's made some good choices the last several moves. Since he pushed e4 and e5, he's improved the position of his pieces, but then some exchanges have been made too, which kind of reduce the winning chances. And positions when the knights are off, they just take on this whole unique flavor, because that leaves you you could end up with a two rook ending, a two rook and queen ending, or it's going to happen in this case, a queen and two bishop ending. And I'll have more to say about about that when we get there. But Black develops a piece with tempo. He's got to catch up in development, but then White just goes and occupies an open file, and now Black decides it's time to take this pawn, and White retakes, and just go through a little bit of maneuvering. Now White's trying to create some kind of play over on the queen side, and Black stops and takes. Now this does mean you have to consider, what about bishop takes? Well, then the rook will just swing over to b8, and Black will end up taking on c4 in a moment. Anyway, White takes back, and then there's a threat on b7 that Black needs to deal with, and he does it by swinging his queen over. Now the queen's on a useful diagonal here. It's a good square. It's providing some pressure on b5. It's not clear how White can drive that queen away all that easily. He's got to deal with the pawn on a5, so he just plays a natural move. Now notice the time. White's down to 6 minutes. And I mean, I've seen in real tournaments, I've seen people with 6 minutes on their clock after 26 moves, but they spent more time on the position, and chances are they were able to find a better move than. I'm not saying White had better moves at any point in here, but it's entirely possible that White did. When you play a long game, if you're a decent player, the more time you get, the more you can make evaluations of the positions that come around when you analyze your candidate moves. So the play is fine on both sides. It's a good skill level, but Black just completes his development finally, opposes the open file. So that was one versatility of Queen B6. I didn't note that it gained time on B5 and it helps secure D8. But White just plays naturally and says, I'm going to keep that file. I'm tripled on it. So Black liquidates a little bit. And here White chooses not to try to offer a queen trade. And I think that's the right choice. Simply if you're playing for win, because I believe White is. He's looking at some counterplay on A7 that White has to, or Black has to deal with. And Black handles that fine. Now if Bishop takes, I think this move could be embarrassing for White. That more or less traps the bishop. So White increases his pressure on A7, and Black covers it. Now let's stop and for a moment and think about this position here. Okay, again, in a real tournament, if White had 5 minutes left, all he needs to do is get to move 40, and he gets a fresh hour on his clock and plenty of breathing room. But this is 45-45, meaning that if White runs his time down, he's basically going to get 45 seconds every move. And when he can make force moves, he can gain some time back on the clock. But if the position's tricky, that time can evaporate so easily. But let's stop and take a look about a couple other things. Okay, I mentioned this pawn on E5 is kind of a target. White is tied down to guarding it, so the Black pieces are active. They're pointing at it. This rook is still on a decent file, and this bishop has some good diagonals to go to. Who knows? It could even maybe come back and oppose its counterpart. White has a little more space on the queen side, but I see a couple of weak squares in the Black position. One is, well, maybe more than that. One is C6, one is E7. That's an isolated pawn, and then the pawn on A7. Let me get rid of these circles and diagrams and stuff. Okay, weak squares in the Black position. Here they are. Weak squares in the White position. Well, I'm going to call E5 weak simply because it's being tied down. Pieces are tied down guarding it. Now, White can and will later play F4 to hold that pawn, but that creates a whole new weakness on G3. For what it's worth, it's possible Black could create an outside pass pawn in an ending with moves like H5, G5, and H4. It's one thing to consider when you make imbalanced pawn structure captures like this. It doesn't mean that Black will be able to do this, but we'll see. So White's still has a light plus, and I'm going to suggest a winning strategy for him here in a little bit. And he does the right thing. He occupies a good square for the bishop. That bishop will not be driven out. And just a little bit of redeployment. Now Black decides there wasn't anything on the F file. I'm going to take the D file. Kind of interesting, just a few moves ago, White was tripled on that file. Now Black owns it. Kind of interesting how things change in chess, huh? So White decides that he wants the option of putting a rook on C6, or maybe even the rook on C7, where it can do some damage. And but then the Black queen penetrates into the White camp, and there's a threat on the bishop and a threat on the pawn on A4. White finds a move which at first looks like it could be a blunder, but it isn't. White has a nice saving resource. A lot of you would say, well, look, rook D3 attacks the queen, wins the bishop. But White has a clever way to get out of this. And 1 second, and we'll see what that is. he plays rook c8 check. Now, pretty much black has to take that rook simply because his only other legal moves are to play bishop f8. Well, let's take a look at bishop f8. What if he does this? Okay, now the king's on the rook. Looks like black will get his piece back, but white gets a chance to do something here. Let's see. What if we just increase the pressure and offer, hey, you want to take my rook? You dare take that thing? It looks to me like white wins this in short order. So black can't take the rook. Black would need to take the bishop with the queen simply to hold on to e7. And it looks to me like white's got some reasonable attacking chances here. The rook can go to a8 and pressure a7. It could go to e7, and and then if king here to secure e7, there's all kinds of possibilities. White doesn't probably need to worry about losing this pawn on a4. White's got some. Well, wait a minute. There's a bishop hanging on f3 I'm not paying attention to. Let's see. Let's look at this a little bit more. Okay. Let's back it up. Rook takes. King up. Okay, now white's up a piece, but his queen is loose and his rook is loose. What can white do here? I was suggesting this move, okay, and now the queen takes here, but then this bishop is loose and this is loose. What am I missing? Probably missing something. Maybe white doesn't take the what if you give up the queen? Let's see, does this do anything? Maybe not. Let's see. We have a bishop f6 check. That doesn't seem to go anywhere. We have this check. I don't know. What am I missing here? I hate it when I miss stuff like this. I mean, because sometimes the answer is just staring me right in the face. It looks like a great maneuver. Black makes the move. He took 2 minutes, a little more than that actually, to take the rook. Let's see. Well, there's nothing making white take that bishop. What if white plays something like queen h6? That looks pretty yummy. Let's see. Now, if black may have to come up with something like queen e6. No, you can't even do that. Yeah, queen h6 just does the trick. See, sometimes, you make the obvious move and then it's not good enough, and then you just look a little further and you find the better move. And anyone of any merit, when they're analyzing, will analyze the incorrect move. It's a matter of going through your candidate moves until you find the correct one. So queen h6 certainly seems to do the trick here. Yeah. So I don't know why he took 2 minutes on it. Could have been away from the computer, getting a drink of water. Okay. Anyway, black gives back the pressure that he had on d3, and white gets his rook back. And then black makes this retreating move, brings the queen all the way back, battening down the hatches, so to speak, keeping this white queen out of d8. So here I think it's safe to say once again white's holding the advantage of the first move. His pieces are just a little better placed than black's. White's got a little more space, but sometimes too much space can mean you can overreach. Now white starts, but look at white's clock. I mean, here he has 4 minutes 11 seconds, and he spent over 3 minutes on his move because he got down to 50 seconds because he got 45 back. That's an awful lot of time to spend on one move that just defends a pawn. Maybe he was trying to decide between Queen E4 and Queen D4, but anyway, it's a little tough when you're getting a position down material. So down time. Black gains time on the bishop. He brings it back to the safe square. King G2 might have been, well, I see a possible drawback with it, but maybe it's not. Let's see, bishop H3 check, and now the queen comes into play, and maybe black even has some mating threats here. Let's burn a move for white. Okay, H5 would threaten a mate in 1. How does white deal with that? I guess with queen A1, queen D8 check, the king finds shelter on H7. You could check directly. Look at this. You could play this check. You don't even have to do that. I want to play this move, but that might, or not bishop there, bishop H6. That might allow an E6 check, which maybe runs out of gas. Let's look at it. Check. Okay, now the threat is a mate, so white needs to deal with that. Queen here probably does that. A little tricky, isn't it? There's always so much to analyze in these endings. Let's see. So I think, when you're down to so much time on your clock, you have 95 seconds to analyze King G2 and Bishop H3 check. Suddenly, it just seems to give black a lot of possibilities. And why should white mess with that? Just get the bishop out of danger. Okay, so I think this is the wise choice. Okay, but it's always interesting to analyze these things. That's how you improve. Okay, now here, this is one of those I'm not sure moves. Okay, it finally covers E5, so white's not tied down to defending it with pieces. But it does weaken G3. It does weaken this king position, and that's going to give black a lot of counterplay as happens in the game and in the variations I have yet to talk about. But at the same time, white does have some winning chances here. He's going about trying to fix black with a second weakness. Black has one weakness already, pawn. Now black's going to have a weakness on B6. So white's very close to how did that rook get on? Yeah. Look at this. Somehow I touched a I touched a rook and on the diagram board, and it made it materialize. Well, I know how to fix that. What's this? This is tricky. Ta-da! I just re-examined the game. Now let's see. Forward about 74. It'll be just short of where we were at. Entering that rook change. What do you mean? Too many parameters? Oh, I had a dash in between. Okay, forward 74. That'll take us 37 moves up. See, just like that, we're fixed. Okay, so bishop C6 now. Whoop! Ah! Okay, now you see the final position. Didn't mean for that to happen. So let's go back 80. No, 78. 76. No command. Back. Oh, gotta put a space. Back 76. See? Look at that. Okay. So there's the F4. And now this move, it weakens G6, but it also provides an extra flight square for the king. And who knows, maybe even a break here. Now, I did say earlier that I would talk about queen and bishop endings. These things are tricky. And the reason is there's so many diagonals. And because not only can, of course, bishops moves on diagonals, but a queen can too. And, they can be very effective. Just check, 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 taking squares away from the enemy king or harassing the opposing queen. They can just do a lot of things, and the white bishops are a little better, simply because the black bishop on g7, it doesn't have a move. So white's doing fine here, but at the same time, his king position's a little weak. If white goes and runs and grabs a pawn at the wrong time, black can invade the white position and start checking. So we'll see here in a bit. We'll talk about it. But here's the point where I think white went astray, and what he does is he starts to offer queen trades galore. If anything, maybe he's trying to gain time on the clock, and we'll watch the clock and see. But I think white has just a good plan here, and essentially you do this, and you don't go steal this pawn. You don't go steal this pawn. Both of those are poisoned. Black's going to have incredible counterplay. What you do is you just sit on this game. You have to play very carefully, and then you try to get the queens off the board. Because if you get the queens off the board, those weaknesses are going to probably spell defeat for black. Black's going to have to prove he can draw, and in some cases black might be able to, but it's going to require a lot of work on his part. But what white needed to do was fix black with a second weakness right here and there, and then go into his maneuver. I think what white wants, he's hoping that his opponent will just take this pawn on a5, so that at the right moment white can collect this pawn on a7 and run this past pawn. And it's kind of funny. That's kind of what happens, but white's not able to do it effectively. We'll see. But you don't have to hurry. There's no rush. Just give the weakness first, then go through this maneuver. So white's just trying to hold a little too much. He's trying to hold the option that maybe black will take and I can win this pawn and run this guy through. So white's just trying to get a little too much, and black starts ignoring the queen trade. But surprisingly, white's not really gaining much time on the clock here. Well, it changes a little bit. See, he's back, and he's managed to gain some time, and white could still grabs a little more time on the clock, not much, 14 seconds. But now, really, has he gained that much? He's maybe gained a minute out of all this maneuvering, and he still hasn't done the take on b6 maneuver to give black the second weakness. And now, black, as I said, black did do that, and he thought a good 4 minutes, close to 4 minutes on that move. So I would trust black's judgment that he can get away with this. So white has missed that chance to fix black with the permanent weakness on b6. So let's see what happens. White's looking at this, great, I'm going to win that pawn, but then black starts going for counterplay. And it's at this point that white makes his critical mistake. And here's the critical mistake. He brings this bishop back, trying to keep the queen out of his position. Okay, well, sometimes it's a tough thing to say. Sometimes we want to win every game we play, right? And sometimes we're so close to having the win, and it slips out of our fingers, but we maintain an attitude that we say, I was winning this, I deserve to win it, I'm going to keep playing for a win. I got to win, I got to win. And what you end up doing is you play for a win that you shouldn't play for a win in. And even though the white king is exposed, and even though this opens up another diagonal for a black bishop, this is a perfect time to just go for a draw. If black wants a perpetual check, let him have it. Okay? If you want to go bail out with perpetual check, if you can get one, take it. Is it possible that white has a perpetual check here? I wouldn't be surprised at all. Now, white probably has some winning chances still, but owing to the time on the clock, it's going to be difficult to see, especially when the moment you get aggressive, chances are black's going to have a lot of play here. Let's suppose white runs out of checks. I mean, white still has checks here, but let's suppose white plays an aggressive move, and I'm putting this bishop on e8 simply to take away g6 from the king. Well, all of a sudden, maybe black gets some play here. Where are you going to go with the king? You know, you can run right into a draw here, and if you try to come out, where are you going to come out to? You know, as I was saying earlier, these bishops on diagonals can just rake across a position. White's not crossing, so I think it was a time when white just got a little careless, and black's right in the thick of the game. And for the moment, black's actually a pawn ahead. And now all of white's pawns are isolated. This pawn on g3 is still weak. The pawn on e5 is weakened because its protector is gone. But white's got this passed pawn. And you know, if you don't analyze this carefully, well, white could win, but black conducts himself finely. Very well. He just goes and grabs a pawn. And maybe this is the time that white needs to start looking for perpetual check. Maybe he has it. Let's see. Now you can't play queen d8 check. The queen's covering it. So yeah, white's in a little bit of trouble here. Oop, wrong button. And black just shuts the file off, offers a trade, but black has his Zwischenzug. He picks up another pawn, and now he forces the queens off, something that white was trying for earlier, but black's doing it now on his terms. And look what's happened. White's lost his kingside pawns, okay? And instead of having a weak pawn on b6 to tie black down to, there's an annoying pawn on a5 because white never took on b6. And it's true white can promote that pawn, but those three black pawns are more powerful than the white bishop, and there's just no way white can hold this now, none whatsoever. The black king just marches into up the board, and white can't take the pawn on h6. His king can't. If the white king runs over to the queen side, those kingside pawns are going to get very dangerous, and the black king will be there to support them. So essentially, white's now losing, and it's just a matter of time here. White could resign safely any time now. But let's just run through the final moves here, and you know, white can't take on h4. The pawn on f2 will queen, and the bishop is overworked trying to stop both of the pawns. So now just a winning king and pawn ending. And look at that. This forces a pawn in. No matter which way white goes with his king, a pawn is going to queen. So white tries this method. And now this is forced and makes a queen, and white resigned. So it was a good game. It was well played by both sides. There weren't any major errors. There were a lot of well thought out developing moves, but sometimes it just takes one bad move to make a whole game go south on you. But I hope you learned something from this game. I certainly enjoyed making this video. It was well played by both sides. It's just one of those things that got away. That's all. And thanks so much for your time. I'll be back for the playoffs. I guess those come up next. All right. Take care. Thanks.